Number 3. Linda Ricchio. Linda Ricchio and Ronald Roos, who were both in their early 20s, met in early 1980 in Escondido, California. They were both employed at a car dealership. Ricchio worked at the front desk and Roos was a mechanic. They started dating, and by September, they were living together. They moved in quickly because Ricchio said that her mother had kicked her out. In 1983, they moved into an apartment in Carlsbad, California. In the 6 years that they were together, Ricchio had gotten pregnant twice, but she terminated both pregnancies. By April 1986, after 6 years together, the relationship had soured. Roos had become tired of Ricchio's obsessive behavior. Unbeknownst to Ricchio, he had rented an apartment and made arrangements to move out. Ricchio stayed in the apartment they once shared, and Roos paid the rent and the utilities. For the next year, Ricchio and Roos dated on and off. In June 1986, Roos told Ricchio that he wanted to buy her something nice for her birthday to show his appreciation for their years together. She asked for a ring. So Roos purchased a cubic zirconium ring. Ricchio then told her friends it was an engagement ring. Ronald Roos's 10th year high school reunion was in August 1987. He planned on attending, but he wasn't going to bring Ricchio. When she found this out, she called the reunion committee and told them that Roos would not be attending. Roos told his friends he was trying to be friends with Ricchio while moving on with his love life. But Ricchio was refusing to let go of the relationship. She called him constantly and would show up at his apartment unannounced. She then would refuse to leave. In September 1987, over a year after Ronald Roos moved out of the apartment he shared with Linda Ricchio, he started dating Vicki Woodruff. Roos then told Ricchio to stop contacting him. After breaking out of contact, Ricchio reached out to Roos's sister. Ricchio asked her to encourage Roos to talk to her. Roos's sister refused to help her and told Ricchio it would be best if she moved on. Ricchio said she loved Roos, but she knew the relationship was over. Ricchio told Roos's sister that she felt like killing him. Over the next several weeks, Ricchio called other members of Roos's family and told them she was pregnant and needed to talk to Roos. However, she was not pregnant. In October 1987, Ricchio started harassing Roos's new girlfriend, Vicki Woodruff. On October 12th, Woodruff's car was parked at Roos's spot at his apartment. Ricchio scratched her car. Ricchio managed to get Woodruff's phone number and address from the Department of Motor Vehicles. Woodruff lived with her mother. Ricchio then started making harassing phone calls to Roos, Woodruff, and Woodruff's mother. At the end of October 1987, Roos applied for a temporary restraining order. The day after Roos applied for the restraining order, Ricchio, who had not yet been served the restraining order, went into Roos's workplace and tried to talk to him. It was the third time she had come to his workplace in 5 days. He tossed a shop rag at her and it hit her in the torso. Ricchio filed battery charges against him. On November 3rd, Ricchio was served with a restraining order. 5 days later, Ricchio made 2 disturbing phone calls to people in Roos's life. She called Roos's good friend and told him she was going to kill Roos and Woodruff and then herself. The second call was to Roos's sister. Ricchio told her she was, quote, going to do something to your brother that I'm going to regret, unquote. 3 days later, on November 11th, 1987, Roos was playing softball. Ricchio showed up and they got into a loud argument. That night, Woodruff spent the night at Roos's apartment. The next morning at 5 a.m., someone rang the doorbell. Woodruff opened the door and found some items that belonged to Roos. They had been destroyed. About 3 hours later, Ruse and Woodruff left for work. Ricchio, who had been watching their apartment, yelled at them. Several days later, on November 17, 1987, Ricchio paid for a .38 caliber revolver, but there was a 15-day waiting period, so she didn't take the gun with her. On November 21, 1987, Ruse and Woodruff moved into a new apartment. They didn't tell Ricchio where they had moved to, but she had managed to get the address from the utilities department. On December 5, 1987, Ricchio picked up the gun she had purchased. That same day, she went with the gun to Ruse and Woodruff's apartment. She taped a threatening note addressed to Woodruff on the apartment door. In the note, she wrote she was pregnant with twins and Ruse was the father. Ricchio also wrote, quote, "I'm going to tear the two of you to the bone," unquote. After finding the note on the door, Ruse and Woodruff called the police. An officer found Ricchio in her car in the couple's neighborhood. He told her to stay away from them. The next day, Woodruff and Ruse ended their relationship because of the stalking. The same day Ricchio taped the letter to the door, she mailed a letter to Woodruff. Part of it reads, quote, "Seems you wound up in a place I warned you to back away from. There is no way in hell I was going to give you the opportunity to spend time with Ron. Hope your 3 months was worth this, bitch. No one is about to replace my 7 years. Unfortunately, this was the only solution. Ron made his bed, and I had to make sure he was going to lie in it. I told you I would get him in the end," unquote. On December 8, 1987, Ricchio went to the gun range and practiced firing the gun. 2 days later, Ricchio signed the rental agreement for the apartment next to Ruse's. 4 days after that, on December 14, 1987, Ricchio called Ruse and told him she had rented the apartment. She said they needed to talk. Ruse agreed, and after work he went to her apartment. Around 5:30 p.m., neighbors heard 5 gunshots. Ruse, who had been shot twice, made it to a neighbor's apartment. 28-year-old Ronald Ruse died before the paramedics arrived. Ricchio ran from the apartment and got into her car. She drove several miles to Oceanside, California, and then found a phone booth. She called 911 and told them she had shot her former boyfriend. 27-year-old Linda Ricchio was arrested. She was called the Fatal Attraction Killer in the media. The film, Fatal Attraction, is about a woman who stalks a man after having a one-night stand with him. Fatal Attraction was released in theaters about 3 months before the murder. Linda Ricchio went to trial in March 1989. The prosecution said that Ricchio was angry that Ruse had broken up with her and moved on. She harassed him, his girlfriend, and his family for months and then killed him. Ricchio's lawyer argued that the death was an accident or self-defense, but it was not murder. Ricchio testified on her own behalf. She said she had never planned on killing Ruse. She had asked him to come to her apartment to talk over things. She said if that didn't work, she was going to shoot herself in front of him so he would have to live with the guilt of what he did to her for the rest of his life. She said in the year after he moved out, he had tortured her by leading her on. Ricchio said that Ruse told her he was trying to find someone to kill her. Ricchio said that Ruse lunged at her and it scared her. She said the gun went off and she didn't remember shooting Ruse. The prosecution argued that Ricchio had always intended to shoot Ruse. She had recently purchased the gun and practiced firing the weapon. She then lured him to her apartment and killed him. The prosecution argued that Ricchio was lying in wait for Ruse. Lying in wait is a special circumstance, and Ricchio could have been sentenced to life without parole if the jury believed she had been lying in wait. The trial lasted 5 weeks. The jury deliberated over 3 days. 29-year-old Linda Ricchio was found guilty of first-degree murder. However, the jury did not find that she had been lying in wait for him. They thought she probably did that but there was insufficient evidence to prove it. In June 1989, Ricchio was sentenced to 27 years to life. Linda Ricchio first applied for parole in 2004. She told the parole board that Ruse was abusive and hired someone to kill her, so she bought the gun as protection. Ruse lunged at her and she shot him. She was denied parole. 3 years later, she tweaked her story and said she bought the gun to shoot herself and instead shot Ruse when he charged at her. She claimed she had used methamphetamine before the shooting. She was denied parole once again. Every time between 2004 and 2016 that Ricchio applied for parole, she was denied. Then, in October 2017, she was granted parole. However, in March 2018, Governor Gavin Newsom reversed the decision. There were two reasons given for the reversal. The first was the nature of the murder, and the second was that Ricchio had not fully accepted responsibility for her actions. For example, in 2016, when talking to a psychologist, she said she had not been stalking Ruse. She had also given inconsistent statements to the parole board. Sometimes she gave inconsistent statements in a single hearing. For example, at her 2017 hearing, where she was granted parole, she said she bought the gun for her safety because Ruse had hired a hitman. Then minutes later, she admitted she bought the gun to kill Ruse. Since the decision was reversed in 2018, Ricchio has been denied parole 3 times. The last time was in 2024. At the time of this recording, 64-year-old Linda Ricchio is serving her sentence at the California Institution for Women in Chino, California. The tentative date for her next parole hearing is July 2027. Number 2. Monica Mogg. In the autumn of 2012, 42-year-old Jung-Yi Kim, who also went by Lillian, lived in River Edge, New Jersey. She had lived there for about 10 years. She worked as an interior designer in New York City. Kim was divorced. That autumn, she was dating 42-year-old Arthur Donalda Chan of Washingtonville, New York. Donalda Chan was a project manager at IBM. He had 2 children from his first marriage. After he and his wife split up, Donalda Chan started dating Monica Mogg, a preschool teacher. Mogg's first marriage, which produced 3 daughters, was abusive. Mogg had borderline personality disorder. Donalda Chan's family said in the last years of their relationship, Mogg terrorized him. They said she used and manipulated him. Donalda Chan and Mogg broke up after 10 years together. Mogg did not take the breakup well. On October 31, 2012, the police rushed to do a welfare check on Jung-Yi Kim. The day before, Hurricane Sandy had swept into the area. In the main bedroom, the police found the dead bodies of 42-year-old Kim and her boyfriend, 52-year-old Arthur Donalda Chan. Donalda Chan had been shot 6 times in the torso. Kim was stabbed 14 times with a hunting knife. One stab severed her jugular. Other stabs were 3 inches into her organs. Donalda Chan's family told the police to investigate his former girlfriend, 49-year-old Monica Mogg. It turned out that Mogg's family had reported her missing. Hours after the bodies were discovered, Mogg was found in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, and arrested. In custody, she confessed to the murders. She said she started stalking the couple months earlier in June. She bought a .22 caliber rifle and did target practice. She was looking for a good opportunity to murder her ex-boyfriend. The night before the bodies were found, Hurricane Sandy was storming. Mogg said that night she entered Kim's home through an unlocked back door. She brought the rifle, a hunting knife, duct tape, and rope with her. She went into the main bedroom where she found Donalda Chan and Kim. Noel DeChan had his back to her, and when he turned, she shot him 6 times. She claimed that she didn't plan on killing Kim, but they scuffled. Mogg said she pulled the knife out of her pocket and stabbed Kim until she fell to the floor. Kim fought desperately for her life. She managed to bite off part of Mogg's ear. She tossed the rifle and knife into the Hudson River. She planned on taking her own life, but she was arrested before that happened. After Mogg confessed, the police found the rifle, but they did not find the knife. The police said they did not believe Mogg when she said she didn't plan on killing Kim. Noel DeChan lived alone, and if she just wanted to kill him, she could have broken into his home. In June 2015, 2.5 years after the murders, Monica Mogg pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and stalking, among other charges. She had planned on pleading not guilty by reason of insanity, but changed her mind. She did not explain why she decided to plead guilty. In September 2012, Mogg was sentenced to 166 years of prison. Mogg's lawyers appealed. In May 2016, the appeals court ruled that the sentence was excessive. Months later, in October 2016, Mogg was resentenced to 80 years of prison. She will have to serve 85% of her sentence before she can apply for parole. She'll be eligible for parole in 2080 when she's 117 years old. Monica Mogg is currently 61 years old, and she is serving her sentence at the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women in Clinton, New Jersey. Number 1. Lisa Michelle Lambert. In the summer of 1991, 16-year-old Lori Sho lived in Lancaster, Pennsylvania with her mother. Lori's parents, Hazel and John Sho, were divorced. Lori was a good student who wanted to be a nurse or a hairdresser after she got out of school. Over a week in the summer of 1991, Lori went on a few dates with 20-year-old Lawrence Youngkin. But then Youngkin raped her in his truck, and that was the end of the relationship. Youngkin went back to be with his former girlfriend, 17-year-old Lisa Lambert, who went by her middle name, Michelle. Michelle was pregnant with Youngkin's child. Lambert was a high school dropout who had been kicked out of her home. Her parents accused her of stealing money. Lambert and Youngkin lived in a trailer in the woods. When Lambert discovered that Lori had briefly dated Youngkin, she started stalking and harassing Lori. She would call Lori at home constantly and scream at her. Lambert would let the phone ring if Lori or her mother, Hazel, didn't answer the phone. The harassment got to be so bad that Hazel changed their phone number. Lori worked as a sales clerk at a dress shop at the local mall. Lambert started stalking her at work. She screamed and swore at her in front of customers. In July 1991, Michelle Lambert asked some friends for help. She wanted to lure Lori out of her home, cut off her hair, and tie her to a flagpole in town. 2 of the young women who were asked to help told Lori about the plan, so the plan was abandoned. That same month, Hazel went to the mall to pick up Lori. She saw Lambert grab her daughter and push her against a wall. Hazel made a police report. Weeks later, on August 20th, 1991, Hazel and Lori were shopping. Lori came up to them and started screaming at Lori. Hazel told Lambert to leave them alone or they would file rape charges against Youngkin. What Lambert didn't know was that weeks earlier, on July 31st, 1991, Lori had reported to the police that Youngkin had date raped her. For months, the stalking and harassment continued. On November 22, 1991, Lori was in the mall's parking lot with several friends. Suddenly, Lambert came up and attacked Lori. She slapped her and hit her head against the cab of a truck. Lambert accused Lori of ruining her life and her unborn baby's life. Lambert then said she had friends who would kill Lori if she told the police about the assault. Lori's mother filed a complaint with the police over the incident. A police investigation was not started until about a month later, on December 16th. An officer called Lambert's parents and asked them for her current address. They claimed they didn't know where she was. 2 days later, Lambert was talking to a friend, and she said she knew the police were after her for the assault. She said she was, quote, going to get Lori, unquote. On December 19, 1991, while at work, Hazel Show received a call from a woman. The woman said she was a guidance counselor at Lori's school. The woman told Hazel they had a problem with Lori and a boy, so she needed to come to the school the next morning to discuss it. Hazel agreed to come in. The next morning, Hazel left her condo just before 7 a.m. When she left, Lori was getting ready for school. Hazel arrived at the school and discovered that the guidance counselor was not there yet and no meeting had been scheduled. So Hazel drove home. When she got to the condo, a neighbor told her they had heard a loud commotion coming from her condo. Hazel got inside and found that there were signs of a struggle. A plant was overturned and Christmas cards were scattered on the floor. She found her 16-year-old daughter, Lori, lying in a pool of blood on her bedroom floor. A rope was tied around her neck. Hazel got a knife and cut the rope. That's when she saw that her daughter's throat had been slashed. Hazel held her dying daughter in her arms. Her daughter said, quote, "Michelle did it," unquote. She then told her mother she loved her. Then her 16-year-old daughter died in her arms. Lori had been stabbed several times in the torso. One punctured her lung, and another barely missed her spine. There was a 5-inch slit across her throat. It also appeared that some of her hair had been hacked off. Later that day, the police found 20-year-old Lawrence Youngkin and 19-year-old Michelle Lambert at a bowling alley where they were known to hang out. 17-year-old Tabitha Buck was with them. Buck was friends with Lambert. The police noticed that Buck had a fresh cut on her right cheek. The police asked her what happened to her face. Lambert spoke for her. She said they had fought with a group of girls earlier that morning. The trio was brought in for questioning. Tabitha Buck refused to give a statement. Michelle Lambert denied they were involved in the murder and they weren't in the area that morning. Lawrence Youngkin told the police that Lambert and Buck had killed Lori Show. He thought they were only going to beat her up. Youngkin said the night before the murder, he took Lambert to Kmart, where she purchased gloves, sunglasses, rope, and ski hats. He said that on the morning of the murder, he drove the 2 young women close to Lori's home and dropped them off. He then drove to a nearby McDonald's and had some breakfast. He stayed at the restaurant for about 15 minutes, then drove to a prearranged spot near Lori's home and picked up Lambert and Buck. They drove to the trailer he shared with Lambert. Youngkin told the police that Lambert had told him they accidentally stabbed Lori in the back, so they slit her throat to put her out of her misery. The 2 young women showered at the trailer. Then they drove Tabitha Buck to school. When they got home, he and Lambert washed the clothes, put them in a pink garbage bag, then threw the bag in a dumpster behind Kmart. He said they threw a bag containing the knife, some rope, and a pair of shoes into the river. The police found the bags in the dumpster and the river. The knife was from Lambert and Youngkin's set at home. The rope was similar to the rope around Lori's neck. Michelle Lambert was confronted with the evidence. She then admitted she was in Lori's home that morning. She had gone there to tell Lori she was going to stop harassing her. But then Tabitha Buck forced her way into the condo. Buck had the knife and the rope. Then Buck and Lori started fighting. Lori went for the phone and Buck knocked it away. Lambert said that Buck stabbed Lori in the back. Lambert said that after that, she left the room quickly. The detectives asked Lambert who slit Lori's throat. She told them she didn't know Lori's throat had been slit. She said that Buck must have done it after she left the room. 19-year-old Lisa Michelle Lambert and 17-year-old Tabitha Buck were charged with murder. Youngkin cut a deal with the prosecution. He agreed to testify against Lambert and Buck in exchange for 1 year in prison. In March 1992, while in custody, Lambert gave birth to a daughter. Michelle Lambert chose to be tried by a judge. If she were to be found guilty, she would have been sentenced to death. At her July 1992 hearing, the prosecution pointed out that Lambert had been stalking and harassing Lori for months. Lambert told several people she wanted to kill Lori. 3 people testified that on at least one occasion, Lambert said she wanted to slit Lori's throat. After Lambert assaulted Lori in the parking lot of the mall on November 22nd, Lambert told Lori she had friends who would kill her if she reported the assault. 4 days before the murder, the police called Lambert's parents looking for her. 2 days later, Lambert talked to a friend and told them she knew that the police were looking for her. She told a friend she was going to get Lori. Lambert's lawyer said that Lambert was innocent. Her lawyer claimed she was set up by her abusive boyfriend, Lawrence Youngkin, and her friend, Tabitha Buck. Lambert testified on her own behalf. Lambert admitted she had harassed and stalked Lori in the 6 months leading up to the murder, but claimed she had never said she wanted to slit her throat. She also maintained that she didn't kill her. She also admitted that she bought the items at Kmart, but claimed she bought them because she and Youngkin were going to chop down a Christmas tree later that day. Lambert said that Youngkin was the mastermind of the murder. He was worried that Lori's rape accusation was going to land him in jail. Lambert said that Youngkin wanted her and Buck to beat up Lori badly enough to put her in the hospital. Lambert told him it was a dumb idea because assaulting her like that would also land him in jail. Plus, she was 6 months pregnant and didn't want to risk hurting the baby. Instead, she suggested doing what they had planned to do when she first started harassing Lori, which is cut off her hair. Lambert testified that she and Buck waited outside Lori's condo. But then Buck got impatient and went to the condo. Lambert said she heard a scuffle. She entered the condo and found Lori on the floor with Buck on top of her. She said she held Lori's ankles. She told Lori to calm down because they just wanted to talk. Lori managed to get up and then ran to her bedroom. Buck took out the knife she was carrying and went after Lori. Buck stabbed her in the back, and Lambert claimed she tried to save Lori. She tried to pull Buck off of her, and when that didn't work, she tried to pull Lori away from Buck. Lambert said that blood got on her hands and it freaked her out. She ran from the room and collided with Youngkin. Youngkin ordered her to stay there. She said he went into the bedroom and slammed the door. She then heard more screaming. Then Buck and Youngkin exited the bedroom and the trio fled. As they drove away, they drove past Hazel's show. Youngkin was sure she saw him. The prosecution claimed that Lambert was lying. This was now her third story about what happened that morning. There was also no evidence that Youngkin entered Lori's home. 2 witnesses saw 2 women about the same height leaving Lori's condo that morning. Lambert and Buck were about the same height. Youngkin was notably taller than both women. Also, a McDonald's manager testified that she served Youngkin that morning between 7 and 7:15 a.m., and he stayed about 20 minutes. This confirmed Youngkin's alibi. While in custody awaiting trial, Lambert and Youngkin have been passing messages back and forth through the prison law library. There was one piece of paper with 29 questions that Lambert wrote for Youngkin. Many of the questions were oddly worded. Some of the questions included, quote, It's not my fault that things went wrong. Our prank, Friday morning. Do you even care? I still blame you and Tabby, unquote. Youngkin replied, quote, just wish it didn't happen, unquote. Another question was, quote, will you always stick with me as long as I still don't tell that you held Lori down for Tabby, unquote? He replied, quote, we'll always love you, unquote. A third question was, quote, are you absolutely sure that if I take the blame for you, I'll get less time? Absolutely sure, unquote. He wrote, quote, yes, unquote. Lambert and her lawyer argued that the 29 questions proved that Lambert was telling the truth and that Youngkin was the mastermind and he was in the condo that morning. Lambert testified she originally lied because she was protecting Youngkin, who was her boyfriend and the father of her child. But after reading his responses, she realized he didn't care about her and wasn't worth protecting. On the stand, Youngkin was asked if he had written the responses. He said he had written some of them, but others had been altered. He also said he didn't recognize several questions. An expert testified that the document did not appear to be altered, and there were two sets of handwriting, Lambert's and Youngkin's. The strongest testimony was from Lori's mother, Hazel. Hazel testified that Lori, with her dying breaths, said, quote, Michelle did it, unquote. The defense argued that, because of the 5-inch gash on Lori's throat, she wouldn't have been able to talk. But experts said it was possible. The trial lasted 7 days. The judge found 20-year-old Michelle Lambert guilty of first-degree murder. The judge pointed out that Lambert hated Lori, threatened to kill her in the past, and lied 3 times about the morning of the murder. He found the 29 questions document to be, quote, inconclusive and unreliable, unquote. He chose to spare Lambert's life and sentenced her to life without parole. Tabitha Buck went to trial several months later in September 1992. It was an 8-day trial, and Buck's lawyer argued that Buck wasn't at the crime scene that morning. He pointed out there was no physical evidence that placed her there. Lawrence Youngkin testified at the trial. Michelle Lambert was scheduled to testify, but she didn't. The trial lasted 8 days, and then the jury deliberated for 3 hours and 10 minutes. Tabitha Buck was found guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to life without the chance of parole. The jury did not believe she was the mastermind of the murder, and she probably didn't even stab Lori Show. But they did think she was an accomplice. They did not think she had any reason to kill Lori other than that her friend, Michelle Lambert, wanted her dead. The district attorney said that Lawrence Youngkin had violated the terms of their plea bargain by committing perjury. During Lambert's trial, he was asked if he wrote the responses on the 29 questions document. Youngkin said that he had not written them all and that the document had been altered. However, the expert said that the document had not been altered and it was Youngkin's handwriting. So the district attorney said that the plea deal where he would serve a year was no longer valid. Instead, in October 1992, Youngkin pleaded guilty to third-degree murder and he was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. Michelle Lambert appealed her conviction to 2 different courts, both of which were rejected. Then, in September 1996, Lambert sent a handwritten letter to U.S. District Attorney Judge Stuart Dozell. In the letter, she claimed she was framed for murder. She said proof of it was the 29 questions document. Judge Dozell announced that there would be an evidentiary hearing and appointed a lawyer to handle Lambert's case. On March 31, 1997, the federal evidentiary hearing began. Lambert's lawyers argued that Lambert had been set up. The real killers were Lawrence Youngkin and Tabitha Buck. They claimed that the sheriff's department, who investigated the case, framed Lambert to keep her quiet. Lambert alleged that 6 months before the murder, she was gang raped by 3 sheriff's deputies. The defense had an expert in abusive relationships testify. They said that Lambert had been abused and groomed by Youngkin. At the first trial, Youngkin admitted he had hit Lambert 3 times. The defense said that Lambert had lied to protect Youngkin. One of the strongest pieces of evidence was Lori's mother, Hazel, testifying that as Lori died, she said that Michelle did it. A speech expert testified that because of the wounds on Lori's neck, it would have been impossible for Lori to have said anything. The defense also said that the police ignored or did not disclose evidence to the defense. For example, the police said they did not find a pink trash bag when they searched the river, but there was a video of them finding the bag on the banks of the river. In the first trial, the prosecution said there was no evidence Youngkin was at the condo that morning. But Lori's mother and one of her neighbors saw Youngkin driving near the condo that morning. Lori's mother told a detective this, and she was told not to dwell on it. A second witness was a neighbor, and she said she saw Youngkin driving near the condo around the time of the murder when he was supposedly at McDonald's. After about 2 weeks of testimony, before Judge Giselle made his final ruling, he released Michelle Lambert to the custody of her lawyers. She had served about 5.5 years in prison. The hearing continued for another 4 days. The defense argued that there were other major problems with the case. For example, a telephone cord was wrapped around Lori's leg in the crime scene photos. The prosecution used the photos as evidence that Lori had been bound when she was attacked. But the paramedics did not remember seeing the cord around Lori's leg. Also, a police officer sketched the crime scene, but he did not draw the phone cord. The defense also said there were 2 sets of initials that Lori wrote in blood. It wasn't visible at the crime scene, but crime scene analysts enlarged the negatives and then saw them. The initials were TB and BY. TB stood for Tabitha Buck, and Lawrence Youngkin's nickname was Butch, so BY were his initials. The defense claimed Lori wrote the initials of her killers as she was dying. The prosecution admitted some mistakes were made in the case, but they were not huge mistakes that altered the facts of the case. The prosecution was adamant that there was no cover-up and Lambert had not been framed. After 14 days of testimony, Judge Giselle declared Lambert innocent. He concluded that 6 of the prosecution's witnesses had committed perjury. He also said that Lambert could never be tried again for Lori's murder. Judge Giselle said it was the worst case of misconduct he had ever heard of in the English-speaking world. Judge Giselle also requested that the FBI investigate the Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney's Office. A week later, a criminal probe was launched into the people involved in Lambert's prosecution. The state of Pennsylvania appealed the decision. They said a federal judge should not have intervened in a state matter. In December 1997, the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit overturned Judge Giselle's ruling. They determined that Lambert had not exhausted all her appeals at the state level, so a federal judge should not have heard her case. In early February 1998, after about 10 months of freedom, 25-year-old Michelle Lambert returned to prison. On April 29, 1998, there was a post-conviction hearing to determine if Lambert received a fair trial. The presiding judge was the same judge who found her guilty in 1992. The defense made similar arguments to those they made at the federal hearing. They claimed that Youngkin and Buck committed the murder, and the Sheriff's Department framed Lambert to cover up a gang rape committed by 3 deputies. As evidence of the conspiracy, they pointed to the crime scene photos being different from the police sketch. They argued to accomplish this, the police retrieved Lori's body from the morgue, then staged the body to fit their case against Lambert. The Pennsylvania State Attorney's Office was handling the case this time. They argued that the conspiracy made no sense. They said that the conspiracy was impossible. To make it possible, nearly 100 people needed to be involved. Many of those people had no connection to each other. They also had no reason to frame Lambert. Lambert's defense team said that the cover-up stemmed from alleged gang rape of Lambert. But one of the officers who was accused was out of state when Lambert claimed the rape happened. He was on his honeymoon. He had his wedding certificate and hotel receipts to back up his alibi. The prosecution also showed evidence that Lambert had a history of making rape accusations. She had accused 11 men, including family members, of rape. Tabitha Buck testified. She admitted she was the one who called Lori's mom and set up the fake appointment with the guidance counselor that lured her out of the home. Buck said that Youngkin dropped her and Lambert off. Then she and Lambert went into Lori's condo that morning. Buck said she held Lori down while Lambert stabbed her. She said that Lambert sawed her neck like it was a loaf of bread. Other evidence turned out to be invalid. For example, the FBI reviewed the crime scene photos. They did not see any initials written in blood. Also, the witness who saw Youngkin near the condo around the time of the murder was unreliable. She reported the sighting 6 months after the murder. In those 6 months, there was a lot of media coverage of the murder. She had a chance to read about the case before she said she saw Youngkin there that morning. The prosecution said that the case was straightforward. Lambert hated Lori because she had dated her boyfriend, so she stalked and harassed Lori for 6 months. Lambert threatened to kill Lori if she reported an assault to the police. 4 days after Lambert found out that the police were investigating the assault, Lori was murdered. The night before the murder, Lambert bought items used in the murder, like the rope. The murder weapon came from her kitchen. Then after the murder, she got rid of the evidence and lied to cover up her involvement. The hearing lasted 8 weeks. Then 2 months later, the judge released his 322-page opinion. He said that Lori was guilty and received a fair trial. He said the frame-up allegation was unbelievable. Michelle Lambert appealed the decision and it was denied. In 2003, her lawyers asked the Supreme Court to review her case and reinstate Judge Chazelle's ruling. The Supreme Court chose not to review her case. In 2005, Michelle Lambert exhausted all her appeals. In August 2003, 32-year-old Lawrence Youngkin was paroled. He had served 12 years in prison. In November 2017, Tabitha Buck received a new sentence. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that mandatory life sentences for juveniles were unconstitutional. Buck's new sentence was 28 years to life. In December 2019, after serving almost 28 years in prison, 45-year-old Tabitha Buck was released on parole. At the time of this recording, 52-year-old Lisa Michelle Lambert, who was 19 at the time of the murder, is serving her sentence at the Massachusetts Correctional Institution, Framingham. She does not have a chance at parole, so unless her sentence is changed, she will die in prison. Thank you so much for watching today's video. We just want to remind you we started a channel membership where half the funds will go to solve a cold case. For more information, click on the video that's on the screen now. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.